Hi there, PolishLynx here. Ambre is the game. Let's continue the story. Interesting story. Then, after what felt like an eternity, he got to his feet. He moved to gather all his framed pictures that had been on the furniture and stowed them in the closet. They needed to be out of sight. If Ambre discovered the pictures of her happy alter ego too quickly, she was obviously going to wonder. He stored them in a drawer and locked it. The frames didn't take up too much space. After all, there weren't that many of them, and he always put the same ones on the buffet. She would never notice it. When he was sure that there were no more pictures to put away, Tristan put his coat back on and went outside. It was cool, a bit dark, but there was still enough light to see by. It was the ideal time to take a walk. At least that's what he would have thought. As he hurried along the sidewalk, the 30-year-old man was anything but relaxed. Nervously, he walked around her most familiar place looking for serenity that seemed to be out of reach. He had to find her. He had to bring her back home. While he passing by a park near his home, Tristan heard a high pitch almost inaudibly. His heart jumped, and he stopped. In the dim light of the setting sun, he made out the silhouette of a little girl sitting on a swing with her head bowed. Tears rolled down her cheeks. He came closer slowly, so as not to surprise her, and examined her attentively. He was indeed standing in front of his wife, Ambre Malory, who used to be so charming. She was still pretty, but she seems to have aged prematurely. White locks here and there brightened, and her long hair to the point where you couldn't tell her age anymore. With that appearance, she could have been an old lady. However, she was in her 30s, like Tristan, who didn't appear any younger. Back-hunched, looking haggard, eyes more lifeless than ever, she was crying. Her clothes were crumpled. She had neither coat nor scarf, and there were scratches on her hands and arms, as if she had been in a fight. Did she roll on the floor? Did she harm herself? Regardless, she had most likely gotten hurt while running away. The park was completely deserted, and she seems to have been there for a while. She must have run away hours ago, probably since the early afternoon. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been in a state where she would be able to cry. She would have been motionless, like a doll, unable to show the slightest sign of life, until finally she'd come back to her senses. For a second, Tristan Malory was tempted to leave her here, to leave her to her fate, but he gave himself a mental slap. He couldn't leave her like that. She was his wife. He loved her. He had to take care of her, no matter what. But even so, sometimes he almost wished she would get lost for good, that she'd disappear, so he wouldn't have to live through this endless circle again. Just do your best to break the fate. You can do this. He consciously protested that he would feel too guilty, that he wouldn't be able to forgive himself. There was no way out. He had to live with his burden. So he placed himself in front of her, and in soft voice he asked, "Is something wrong?" His wife first seems not to hear him. She was choking her sobs, hiccuping, shaking with spasms. He was now sure of it. She had forgotten everything once again. Patiently, Tristan Malory stroked her hair and repeated, "Why are you crying? What happened?" It took long minutes for her to calm down, even a little, but finally, with a faint voice disturbed by sobs, she answered by drying her tears. I don't know. I think I've lost something important, really important, but I can't remember what it was." Tristan Malory sighed, feeling a mixture of compassion and pity. Always that nagging obsession, that curse. She seems so lost, so vulnerable. He wanted to hold her so tightly, her sadness melted away, and at the same time, within him, a voice was telling him that he shouldn't be too forceful. He shouldn't take advantage of her weakness. Ambre didn't recognize him anymore in the end. He would have to wait even if the desire to ease his own loneliness was suffocating. The woman he loved was there, in front of him, and he couldn't so much as touch her. So he tried not to lose face, to appear reassuring, but face to face with that mournful little girl, he was having a hard time. "Are you really all alone? Where are Mommy and Daddy?" I don't know. "Do you live far away from here?" "I don't know." "What's your name?" "Ambre." "Well, Ambre, you can stay like out here in the wind. You're going to catch a cold. That you don't want to get sick, do you?" "No, I hate being sick." "See, you've got to go warm yourself up somewhere. The night is getting close." "But I don't know where to go." "In that case, what do you think about going over to my place? It's not far away from here, and it will make a much better sleeping place than the swing." Ambre seemed weary, but she had no other way but to follow him. He gently extended his hand, and for the first time, she lifted her eyes. They were washed out, blurry with tears, and hesitant. They were the eyes of a little girl stuck in a woman's body, the eyes of a woman haunted by her little girl obsession, the eyes of a trapped person. He thought it a good idea to show her a smiling face, to give himself a protecting role. Even with no fatigue, he caught her fine and frail hand and helped her to get to her feet. The young lady's steps were wobbly weak. She had probably not eaten all day long. Carefully he guided her to his home, making sure she wouldn't trip. The 30-year-old man took off his coat and shut the door behind them. "Make yourself at home. I'll cook you something." Passing through the kitchen, he turned on the light in the living room, so his flat would look less gloomy. While roaming through his fridge, looking for a good meal idea, he stole glances over the counter regularly. In the living room, Ambre was still walking around, a bit wild, still on the defensive. She explored this new environment by looking around, admiring the ornaments. She didn't find much to pique her interest. It was a bland house, almost too bland. There were no clues about the occupants' lives. The pictures of their happy days were carefully hidden. Taking advantage of Tristan's being distracted by a packet of noodles, she escaped to the hallway and tried to find a bathroom. She found it quickly enough before returning to the hallway. Then she noticed that all the doors were wide open, except for one. She was drawn to the doorway, even before she had time to think. Intrigued, Ambre felt magnetically attracted by the slightly open door. Just one peek was all she wanted, but she couldn't see anything through the crack. Was this Bluebird's cabinet? A frightening tomb where Tristan Malory stored the corpses of his former wives? The little girl pushed the door open, entered the room and switched the light on. In the kitchen, Tristan sighed. He was cooking Ambre's favorite meal, but his eyes were too itchy. Shoulders plying, he noticed his wife's absence. She must have found her room, he grunted. His hands were mechanically preparing the meal, but his mind was elsewhere. Little by little, he slowed down, until he stopped completely. Still as a robot, he leaned against the wall. God, what have I done to deserve this? When will she be coming back? When is she going to wake up? His face in his hands, he cried silently in the empty living room. Will my tears reach you one day? When he felt better, he headed towards the forbidden room and caught Ambre playing with stuffed animals. His gaze softened. Without a word, he went to sit next to her. On the bed, the little girl moved the stuffed animal's hands while making them speak. In her weak voice, she meant a stuffed animal tea party, and seems to be having a lot of fun. The light was back in her eyes. Suddenly she got mad at the plump cow and scolded her harshly. "It's dirty! Stop it right now! You're making a mess! Ollie, what did I tell you? What did I just say? It's dirty! You've got to behave yourself! And don't roll on the floor! You shouldn't make a fuss just because you didn't get what you wanted!" As punishment, she sent the cow in the corner, ordering her not to move before replacing her with a pony with long eyelashes. The stuffed animal tea party hosted by the blue monkey was obviously not going as planned. The 30-year-old man eyed the girl's every move with care. She finally noticed his presence. That evening, Tristan admired Ambre as she wolfed down her food. He felt half amused, half distracted. Seeing her happy softened his heart a little bit at the same time. At the same time, it was heartbreaking. He remembered the blissful days already long gone. It wasn't easy, but he still remembered them. The beautiful young lady, her adorable smile, her cheerfulness, their promises. Confronted by Ambre's overflowing enthusiasm, Tristan Malory couldn't help but smile faintly, almost pitifully. Yes, that's it indeed, he kept telling himself, as if to reassure himself. All I'm doing is keeping her around until she remembers who she is and what she's lost. Waiting for her to remember, if she ever managed to someday. Tristan Malory could have been an ordinary man with an ordinary life if everything hadn't changed so drastically after a few years ago due to the consequences of a dire event. Since that day, he was stuck in that infernal circle, a struggle that seems never ending. He had been so happy, fulfilled, with the woman he loved, the woman he had married. Ambre, the charming woman he had sworn his life to, had gone mad. He had never realized how upset she was about having kids until their doctor told them she was sterile. A seemingly overcome able situation, but to her it was as if she had been dealt to death. Death, the death penalty. They could have been put themselves in the hands of science or just have given up on the project altogether and created a new one that they could have been satisfied with in their everyday life, but she couldn't give up the idea. Ambre wasn't willing to let her little girl's dream go or to change a word of the promised fairy tale. It was a must. It had to go that way and that way only. So the pressure she put on herself has the better of her. She couldn't be perfect. She couldn't perfectly conform herself to the absurd mold imposed to her. Something in her head broke like a fragile thread. She had an emotional breakdown. Under her husband Tristan's bewildered eyes, she sank instantly, quickly in a madness, as sudden as it was violent and from which she wouldn't return. Refusing to face reality, she escaped in a long dream, a long nightmare, where she became out of reach. Ambre reverted to childhood, where everything was easier, where everything was still possible. She didn't recognize her husband anymore, or didn't want to recognize him. He had to pretend not to know her each time and get closer to her each time, until she had a new breakdown and everything would be reset again. He had to make her happy and help her better each time, even if it meant bending to her every will, even if it meant living in a world of pretend, even if it meant unrequited love on his part. During this cycle, once more intrigued, Ambre took advantage of his absence to open a drawer she had never touched before. She found the key in the guardian's room. Inside the drawer was a big leather notebook. Surely she had found a treasure. She took it and opened it. It was a photo album. Spread on the page were bright smiles and tender gestures. Browsing the pictures, the little girl discovered the guardian, young and fresh, in the arms of a coquettish young lady. That lady is nice, actually. Dressed soberly and tastefully, she was strolling on the seashore, a shawl on her shoulders, or she was in a park, holding an ice cream. But what caught her eye was a very particular picture towering in the middle of one page. Tristan wearing a suit, slinging his lover out of a church with clumsy footsteps, under a shower of flower petals. She looked so happy, so fulfilled, in her big and refined white dress, that Ambre was stupefied. Even more so because the bride looked exactly like her. "She's so pretty." "What are you looking at?" Tristan's sudden appearance made her jump so quickly that she dropped the forbidden object. The 30-year-old man gazed sobered immediately. Let's end the episode here, because I have a feeling it will be longer, actually, and I think we are not yet heading towards the end. Hopefully you enjoyed that episode. See you in the next one. Bye.